On an island in the North Atlantic Ocean, just shy of the Arctic Circle, there's a place where you can dive into clear, pure water, stretch out your hands, and touch two tectonic plates at once, the North American plate on one side and the Eurasian plate on the other. It's a stunning place that gives us the opportunity to study the tectonics of both plates. But think carefully before you plan your trip, because there's more than just geology to this site, and constant traffic is putting it at risk. Silfra Fissue is located in Iceland's Thingvellir National Park, and it's a perfect example of the unique geology of the island. Iceland is part of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, an enormous mountain range 16,000 kilometers long and up to 1,600 kilometers wide. Like the name suggests, most of the ridge is underwater, stretching across the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean from the Arctic all the way down to the southern tip of Africa. The ridge is a spreading center, which means that it represents the space between two tectonic plates that are drifting apart. Here, the North American and Eurasian plates are moving away from each other at a rate of several centimeters per year. As the plates pull apart, magma rises up from the mantle to fill the gap, forming new oceanic crust and adding to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Iceland is one of the few places on Earth where the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is above water. Because this area of the world is especially geologically active, its landscape is constantly changing, driven by tectonic and volcanic events. At Silfra, a fissure broke open and filled with glacial meltwater, feeding Thingvallavatn Lake downstream. The fissure is narrow enough in parts that a human could touch both sides at the same time, which means that divers willing to brave the freezing cold can hold two tectonic plates in their hands. Now, we should probably clarify something here. It might be tempting to think of Silfra Fissue as the place where two continental plates separate, but it's a little more complicated than that. Silfra is one of the cracks formed by the two continents pulling apart, yes, but it's not the only one. There are loads of similar cracks and fissures all over Iceland, and they're not necessarily connected to each other. That's because Iceland is a place where the boundaries between tectonic plates get a little bit blurred. The island is formed by a volcanic hotspot right betwixt the two plates, and all that tectonic activity means that the boundaries are a bit messy. That said, Silfra is still about as close to between two plates as you can reasonably get. That's made this site extremely popular. 62,000 people visited Silfra Fissue in 2018 to dive or snorkel, and projections suggest that the number is only increasing. But it's not just divers and tourists that care about this region. Scientists care too, because geological sites like Silfra are one of the few places where the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is close enough to study. That means geologists can use Iceland as a model for what must be happening across the whole ridge system. See, we've known for a long time that the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a spreading center, and that it's where new oceanic crust is born. But while that might be happening in the big picture, we still aren't sure how the finer points of the process work. On a large planetary scale, we can clearly see that the two plates are moving away from each other and that new crust is forming in between. But like we've mentioned, when you zoom in, the boundary between the plates tends to get a little blurred. Plates don't spread apart in a single neat line. They do so in clusters of fissures called fissure swarms, and the processes that happen in those swarms are complicated. In these small local areas, we're still trying to figure out some things, like what comes first, the lava flow or the fault line? Does the lava flow into the existing faults, or are the faults caused by volcanic activity in the first place? And since the larger plate boundary is a huge collection of a lot of these small local areas, these small-scale processes add up. Understanding how things work on this small scale can really help us improve our understanding of global plate tectonics. This region, which scientists call the Thingvellir fissure swarm, could help answer those questions. Researchers have been able to apply their findings from the fissure swarm to make fault propagation models that can explain how faults form in other parts of the world. So, Silfra Fissue is an incredible site that means a lot, both to the scientists that use it to understand more about how the world works, and to to the divers that travel from all over the world to enjoy its charms. But unfortunately, its popularity might be more of a curse than a blessing. Research is beginning to show that high tourist traffic is causing permanent damage to the area's unique ecosystem and contaminating the nearby lake. But before we talk about that, here's a quick ad break.
This SciShow video is supported by ACT. If you've only heard of the SAT, well, there's another college admissions test out there. ACT is accepted at all colleges and universities across the country, just like the SAT. And it may be better for you depending on your testing and learning style. Here is what might make the ACT worth your while. The platform you take it on is flexible. There's both a digital test and a pencil and paper version. It's easier to skip around and go back to revise your answers in a section because the ACT is divided into smaller sections across 4 subjects. And there are more questions, which can take the pressure off each individual answer. To learn more about the ACT and decide if it's right for you, visit act.org/scishow.
Now, this isn't to make you feel guilty if you've ever been to Silfra before, because in the past, we haven't fully understood the extent of the damage to the ecosystem. See, we know a lot about how diving perturbs marine ecosystems and can work towards mitigating some of that damage, but freshwater ecosystems like Silfra are entirely different beasts. While marine ecosystems are based on phytoplankton, microscopic photosynthesizers that float around on the top layer of the ocean, freshwater ecosystems tend to be founded on biofilms. Biofilms are wafer-thin layers of microbes that coat the substrate of lakes, which would mean everything on the lake bottom, including rocks, plants, and other debris. They're the reason why rocks in lakes and ponds tend to get slick and slippery. Unlike phytoplankton, biofilms can be easily disturbed by physical activity, like a diver stepping on them or brushing past them while moving. And because species higher up the food chain rely on biofilms to survive, when these fragile biofilms get disturbed, the entire food web feels the consequences. That would be an issue in any ecosystem, but Silfra's fissure ecosystem is especially unique. The ecosystem in the area is dependent on groundwater, which comes from glacier melt and rain in a basin north of the area. Groundwater springs are more likely to have rare and endemic species than other ecosystems, which means that Silfra Fissure contains organisms that just can't be found anywhere else. And to top it off, the ecosystem in this region is already fragile because Silfra Fissure is located at such a high latitude. It's practically in the Arctic, which means it's subjected to extreme weather conditions and a steady flow of cold groundwater with very little temperature variation. When researchers observed divers, they found that 91.4% of all divers caused at least one disturbance to the biofilms during their dive. That means that almost every single diver disturbed the biofilms while they dove. And when you consider the huge numbers of divers visiting the park, that adds up to a lot of disturbances in a year. This is likely the cause of a notable decline in biofilm quantity, which officials and frequent park goers have noted as diver numbers increase. Now again, this isn't intended as a guilt trip, and even if you decide it's better not to go to Silfra, you don't have to give up on your dream of diving between tectonic plates entirely. While Silfra is arguably the most dramatic example, this fissure between 2 plates runs through all of Iceland, and there are other places you can go. For example, both Nesgio and Davifskio are diving sites that come recommended as alternatives by enthusiasts, and the latter is very close to Silfra. You can also visit Thingvellir without going diving. The park is still beautiful, and as a bonus, the area has historical significance as the site of Iceland's first parliament over 1,000 years ago. That said, even if it's from a distance, it's still worth appreciating a place as unique and beautiful as Silfra. From the smallest living things to the largest forces at work beneath our feet, they all come together in the same place.